We'll start in chapter 1. So what we have been talking about is who we are. And so we're briefly going to go through a few slides just to kind of recap us to get us to where we are today. We've been looking at who we are, and specifically through Genesis, how we were created. And then a little bit like that part of the Bible, the story part of the Bible, the narrative part. And so we've been looking into it just to see not like the full encompassing who we are, but to see just how we were designed, how we were created, who God has meant us to be. Just from that aspect of what has been revealed, because the entire Bible tells us and reveals to us who we are and who we're meant to be and what we're meant to do. So this is just one part of it, but that's what we've been looking through. And so we saw like a couple weeks ago or a few weeks ago that God created us personally in his image, male and female. And so we looked at what that means to be created in the image of God, or just a little bit of what that means. That we have a mind that we can freely use, we can think freely, we can freely make moral distinctions, we can understand what is good, what is bad, like God does in Genesis chapter 1, and chapter 2 and chapter 3 actually. But we have this ability to act. God is a God who acts. And we also can act freely. And so that's just a part of what it means to be created in the image of God. And that's what Adam had. And yet, not everything was very good. And that's what we see. Because God created in Genesis chapter 1, male and female. But in Genesis chapter 2, what we see is that after he created Adam, not everything was good. And so, I need a volunteer to read, and then another volunteer to read. So 2 volunteers. Jeremiah. And somebody on this side, Claire. Yeah. Okay, so Jeremiah, can you read Genesis chapter 1? We'll start there just to cover it. Can you read Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27? And then Clara, can you read Genesis chapter 2 and verse 18?
Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let him rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created, male and female created.
Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him."
Okay, thank you. Round of applause for Jeremiah and Clara. That was fine. That was good. So, male and female. I'm going to keep going because I want to be respectful of time. So, male and female, but what does that actually mean? And so that's what we've been looking at. So last week we got a little bit into what it means, like for Adam to be created male. What does that mean? But today I'm going to preach the more dangerous one, maybe the most dangerous, scary one that I've ever done. Because today we're going to be talking about female. Scary, right? I know. Girls, women, like what? Okay, what in the world? So, the very first thing. Well, actually, you can skip because we're going to talk about like created male and female, and we saw that male. It was given like if we need to call it roles, right? Then the guy has that leading role, and we saw just a few different things through Genesis, the beginning of Genesis, why we said that. Male was created first. Man was created first. There was authority that was given specifically to the man. And then also he was held primarily accountable. So he had that leading role. But then you can go to the slide after that talking about men, because like you can skip. We're like, you can just keep going. There we go. You can go back one. Okay, so what we're going to see mainly is that the role, if we need to define it that way, was that women was created to be a helper. And what does that actually mean? And so I have three different things that I think can be kind of taken from this. And honestly, I'm a little bit nervous. So I guess just what I ask is, do not hate me until the end. And then if at the end you hate me, I'm sorry. But please just wait till the end to make that choice, that decision. So, what does it mean to be a helper? A lot of times, helper is considered as like not the big, like not the varsity. And I said that last week, like kind of junior varsity, or like if you had the main character, like Sherlock Holmes, the helper is like, well, you're not Sherlock, you're more like Watson, right? Like, or you're just like this not main character. And I just want to stop that right in its tracks, because helper, specifically, I looked it up, the actual word that God used here, God has used for himself before. Now, who is the main character of the Bible? It's not us. A lot of times we think we are the main character of the Bible. The Bible is all about us. But it's not. It's all about God. And so on the next slide, God specifically is called a helper. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the upholder of my life. And then Jesus refers to himself and the Holy Spirit as helper. Now, when David wrote this, I don't think God was like, well, what do you mean helper? You think I'm less than you? No, obviously not. That's not what it means. So sometimes we just get so caught up in that, but it's not actually accurate. That's not what it means to be helper. In fact, if you really want to break it down, a lot of times what we say is God created like the plants and the animals and all of that, and it was good. And then humans were created, and it was very good. And that's true, but if you really break it down, what you see is that God created the animals and the plants, and it was good. And then there was man alone, and it was not good. And then after that, after he created a helper suitable for man, then that is when it became very good. Because man alone is not good. And so you are not devalued or demeaned to be referred to as helper. It's literally given as an attribute to God himself. So that's just the very first thing that I want to say. But what does it actually mean to be a thank you, round of applause. So what does it actually mean to be a helper? So that's just what we're going to look at. And I don't think it's going to be particularly like mind-blowing or anything like that. It's all stuff that we've heard, but just stuff that's so foundational and important to come back to, I think. In a world that just has no idea what to do with women. Like, ever since the beginning, the world has had no clue what to do with women. Well, like, they've been described as just angels, or like, just like pure, just like beings. And then all the way to, like, the opposite of that. Like, less than, and stepped on, and not seen, invisible, and no voice. And then just like, what do we actually make of this? What does the Bible actually have to say about it? So the first thing that we see, specifically from Genesis, about what it means to be created as a helper, suitable for Adam, the way that Eve was created, was, you can go on the next slide, was an intimate companion. And this is just really simple. When Clara read that verse, and that's where we're going to go off of, the Lord God said in verse 18 of chapter 2, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him." And so he makes him a helper suitable for him. Except that's not what actually happens. Before that, there's this random pause, and it's like, what is this pause in here for? And so the next verse is all about these animals that are coming. And it's like, well, I thought you were going to make a helper. Why are we now talking about these other things that like aren't important to the story? Well, it is important because God was making a point that the helper suitable for him can't just be an animal. But in today's world, I'm an independent, I'm great, I'm good. Man's best friend is a dog. That's what we just said. But a dog cannot be the intimate companion that women were created to be. And so, intimate companion can mean a lot of different things, but specifically, if we just look at it, after God created Eve and brought, in verse 22, brought her to the man, then the man said, "I don't need this. I was good. I was fine." No, that's not what Adam said. He said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. And so this intimate companionship, this is something that goes far beyond just plants and animals. This is emotional, relating, connecting emotionally, spiritually, especially intellectually, and just relational, just having those relationships that can't come from anything else or anyone else. It's specifically the reason that is given for why woman was created. So, intimate companionship. And I don't feel like I need to get too far into that, but I'm just going to pause and talk to what the world says about a lot of guys. Because I'm going to be honest, I feel a little bit of this way. When people try and make sense of the way that guys and girls are different. Because we're created equally in the image of God, equally in the glory of God, but also different. And so there's all of these examples of just how we're different. And I could just list some. When I go to a store, I walk out in 5 minutes. When my mom goes to a store, it's just not 5 minutes. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And that doesn't necessarily encompass how we're different. Because I can completely pick random guys who are going to walk into a store and come out 3 hours later. And I can pick girls who are going to go in a store and come out in 5 minutes. Like, that is not why we're different. And so people use other examples. Well, when I lived where we live now for a while before we were actually married. And I thought it was great. I was happy. It was a house. It had a roof. I had food. Sometimes it was fast food, but like it was food, it was edible. And then suddenly the house was like the ugliest thing in the world. Because then a woman lived in the house and she was like fixing everything that was wrong with the house and putting stuff up on the walls. And I was like, literally, it's just a hole in the wall. Why? But that's how some people say, well, that's how we're different. Because she put up all these decorations and I didn't. That's why men and women are different. That's not why. And so you can give examples of how we can be different, but that doesn't sum up how we're different. And so another way that people say is girls are just relational and men just aren't. Because girls are just always on the phone and talking to their girlfriends and like guys are just, we're good. We're fine. And the reason why I pause to say this and make this distinction is because sometimes that's something that people can buy into. That girls are just so relational, and that's just who they are, and guys just aren't, and that's just who we are. But the whole what wasn't good was man being alone. But he didn't have a choice. Adam didn't have a choice. He didn't have yet anybody, male or female, for him. We do. But sometimes we buy into that like, oh, I'm a man. I don't need anybody. I'm going to tough it out myself. And I just want to clarify to all the guys in here, that's not true. Guy or girl, that's just not true. God created us in his image. God is a triune God. We talked about this before. We were all created for a relationship with him and with each other, not to do life alone. So, when we go at it in that way, saying like girls are just so relational, I'm not, then maybe a way we could look at that is maybe God knew that we're stubborn. That we're just going to hold to that we're not relational. And so maybe God said, man, he's going to need somebody who's really good at relationships. Because sometimes men just, we have our faults. I'm just going to leave it at that. And so there are so many ways that, like, specifically Elizabeth makes up for all of my shortcomings and all of my being stubborn in areas that I shouldn't be stubborn at, but I'm just like, well, I'm just a guy, this is who I am. That's not actually true. But that's why it's so important to have people who, in the image of God, can think freely, can discern right from wrong and good from bad, have those convictions, godly convictions, but just approach life a little bit differently than men do. And that's such a healthy thing. And that's when God said it was very good. Even though we're different, that's okay. Because sometimes we say, I don't need that in my life. I don't need that different in my life. But God said, no, it's not good. I'm going to create this different for you first. I'm talking to the guys right now. For you, and that's when it can be very good. So, that's just a message for the guys. Now we'll get back to the girls. Okay, so intimate companionship, that's the first thing. I'm going to just go to the next one. So the next one that we were, or that women were created for is to be queen of the domestic domain. And this is where people throw tomatoes at me. This is where people throw shoes at me and worse things and say, how dare you? This is 2023. What are you talking about? And I can explain. So, guys, I just said we're going to go back to the girls and I'm talking to guys. I'm sorry, I'm such a guy. But guys, we were given dominion over the earth. God said, subdue the earth. Spread out, multiply all over the earth, subdue it, have dominion, take control. And we do that. And that's why people even, like, sometimes people get so caught up in, like, why do guys, like, just are so drawn to video games and, like, these fighting games and stuff like that? That's literally just an example of us being able to kind of have that control over that world. Where I can take dominion. I can play this character that is just taking control and saving the world. And that's something that God put in us. Because we're supposed to subdue the world. We're supposed to fight injustice, and so you're always fighting the bad guys, and that's not a bad thing. But it's not just given to men. In chapter 1, when God said, subdue the earth, he didn't just say it to men. Verse 28, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth. That includes God. Girls, I can't talk. That includes girls. But that includes girls over the entire earth. And yet what you see time and time and time and time and time over and over and over again affirmed and repeated in the Bible is yes over the entire earth, but especially in the home. And so I have a couple verses. Titus chapter 2. We're just going to read this real quick. Likewise, teach the older women to live in a way that honors God. They should teach others what is good, so that they may encourage the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to work in their homes, to be kind, and to be subject to their husbands, so that the word of God will not be dishonored. Now again, don't throw anything at me yet. It's just repeated over and over in the Bible. Verses like this. Proverbs chapter 14 verse 1 says that the wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with the work of her hands. What do, not all feminists, but there are those feminists, and we know who we're talking about. What is their whole message? Get out of the homes. Tear it down. But this says that's what the foolish does. That's what the foolish woman tries to do. So there's more to it than we think. Okay? So, this is going to sound as bad as me saying, I get it, it's February, as bad as me saying, black people go back to slavery. Okay? That's not what I am saying. Okay? This is the message of the world. If you focus on your home, you don't have a life. And yet God, over and over again, says that that is the very thing that is so important and vital and necessary and gives life. So it's the complete opposite of what the world is. You don't have a life versus this is life, okay? So I'm just going to keep going with this. Proverbs chapter 31. Does anybody know anything about Proverbs chapter 31? Yes, Yoda.
It's the chapter of the Bible that talks about the wise woman and the woman of, pretty sure.
The perfect woman,
Yeah,
basically,
perfect.
yes. Okay, so we're going to go there real quick. And I'm going to try and, take that control because I'm so nervous preaching on this. And it's showing, for sure. So, we're going to go to Proverbs chapter 31. And we're just going to take a look at this woman. We're going to take a look at this perfect woman, this ideal, this wonderful woman. Now, if you have ever been to any kind of women's conference for 20 seconds, then you've probably heard of this chapter. And they focus on it, and they teach women, this is what you need to be like. Nothing wrong with that. But I just want to notice that this was not written for girls. This wasn't written for women. In verse 1 of Proverbs 31, the words of King Lemuel, the oracle which his mother taught him. So this is for guys to understand. This is what the ideal woman looks like. This is what, in a world that has no idea what to do with women, that has no idea what kind of worth and value and identity to give women, this is what it is. And so it's for girls too, obviously. And so that's why we're going to look at it. But it's more than just for girls as well. So we're just going to briefly go through this, starting in verse 10, and just see some of the characteristics, some of the qualities and attributes of the quote-unquote perfect woman. Which we know doesn't exist, because the perfect man doesn't exist, the perfect woman doesn't exist. The only one who was perfect was Jesus. But bear with me. So, verse 10. An excellent wife who can find, for her worth is far above jewels. That sounds rare to me. So, this woman, this ideal woman is rare. Do you have a question? For what I just read? So we're in Proverbs 31, and I'm starting in verse 10. And we're just going through it quickly. So, verse 10 is saying that this woman, this wonderful woman, is rare and also precious. Okay? Verse 11, the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. The heart of her husband trusts in her. What that's saying is that she's reliable. She's somebody that, I don't have to worry about Elizabeth, because I know that she's going to be doing the things that she's supposed to be doing. I know that she's going to be following God. I know that she's going to be encouraging people. I know that she's going to be earning money. That's great. Go out, earn some money. All of that. So, okay, keeping going on. I cannot talk. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. And what I really got from this, verse 12, the ideal, the perfect woman is somebody who's filled with the Spirit. Because we're talking about the way that somebody acts in the home, in that private area of somebody's life, in secret, when nobody else is watching. That's integrity. And that's what comes when you have that relationship where day in, day out, she's just doing good. She's self-sacrificially loving that stubborn man. Thank you. Who isn't perfect and who makes mistakes. Not just anybody can do that, for sure, obviously. So, continually just does him good and not evil. All the days of her life. She looks for wool and flax, and she works with her hands in delight. So this is where it just starts getting almost impossible. The more we go on, the more impossible it gets. But we're going to see that this Proverbs 31 woman, she has a PhD in 20 different things. She's just so perfect. So she works, okay? She is this textile fabric manufacturing machine, development, hardworking, professional, overseer in verse 13. She does all of these things. Verse 14, she's like a merchant ship, bringing her food from afar. So I mentioned, for me, there was a lot of fast food when I was living by myself. Elizabeth, because she doesn't spend 5 minutes in the grocery store buying candy, because she is not like that. Now, when I go home, I open the cupboard, and I actually have one. I didn't have one before I was married, literally. I had the little things above a kitchen sink and stuff like that. After we got married, we actually got a cupboard. And it's full and it has stuff, and the fridge is stocked. Because Elizabeth and my mom will spend all of this time finding the best deals and just going out the merchant ships, gathering, bringing stuff back into the docks of the merchant ship. And that's what Elizabeth is like. She'll just go out and do that. And I'm just this is amazing. The merchant ships have come back and it's wonderful. And I just reap that benefit because that is just who she is. That's what she does. That's what my mom did for 10 kids, finding all the best deals and stuff like that. Merchant ships going forth and coming back. She rises also while it is still night. Verse 15, she's diligent, she's hardworking, and gives food to her household and portions to her maidens. Now, this is where I want to pause. She's doing all of this stuff. She's doing all this wonderful work. She's earning money. brings in income. If we keep going, we can see like she's in real estate, she's in agriculture, she just does everything basically. But what she's providing for is her household. And this is where you can go to the quote. I'm just going to read this because I think it's powerful. Our culture does appreciate what women have to offer as long as they don't do it at home. If she goes to the factory every day and makes meals for families that cannot cook for themselves, she is liberated. If she cooks for her own family, she is enslaved. If she goes to the daycare and takes care of someone else's kids, she's liberated. She's empowered. If she stays home and takes care of her kids, she is demeaned. And that is what the culture has turned the home into. And this is what I want to say, to just try and make sense of this and where I'm going with this. The world will tell you that the home is where potential is lost, where your whole future is lost. It's where just like you had so many talents and gifts, and it's just all being wasted away in the home. That is the message of the world right now. And what this is saying, we're not going to read it all because we don't have time, but what it's saying through all of this is it's the very opposite. That is where it's realized. That is where you can do all of these things and help your household. And so what I really want to say is it's not exclusive, like that verse that says like works in the home. Some people take that and say like a woman can't ever have a career. A woman can't ever earn money or do things for herself or have dreams or visions that don't include like I'm just going to take care of my 17 kids. I'm the Duggars. Not that. It's not exclusive where that's all it is, but it is inclusive. Because that's what the Bible gives priority to for the guy and the girl, for the woman and the man, for the husband and the wife. If a man wants to fish all day or play video games all day, or it can be good things. If a man wants to just work all day or feed the homeless all day, and as a result of that, his family is left unprovided for, that's bad. That's sin. That goes against what God dictated for man. If the woman wants to fish all day, or play video games all day, or work all day, or feed the homeless all day, whatever it is, same exact thing, and as a result of that, isn't there to nurture her family, same thing, that's bad. And so, it is by no means a horrible thing to want a career and to chase these dreams and have all of these goals in life. But we just have to keep in mind what the Bible affirms is priority and is important, the real things that are important. Because what the world will say is, basically the message they're saying is money and status by having the job or the whatever you're doing outside of the home. That's more important than family. That's really what the message is. By saying that stuff is better than staying at home. And so, I wish that we could just read this whole thing. There are so many more things about the Proverbs 31 woman. She's prepared. I wanted to read the whole thing. I can't. I'm going to keep going because you guys read it in your own time and I kind of would be curious. Just make a list. That's what I did. I just went through it and I have this list of just all of the qualities of a Proverbs 31 woman. That she does banking, she does profit management and investment. Verse 17, I will just say verse 17 because this is like the feminist verse. She girds herself with strength and makes her arms strong. We're not saying women just need to be weak and hide behind their men. That's not what it is. No, be capable. That's what the Proverbs 31 woman is. Capable, a wise steward of what God has given her, a social worker. I already said prepared in advance. She's ready when things come up, clothed with dignity. there's more things, but do you understand what I'm trying to say here? Okay, good. Then I'm not going to just dwell on it too much. But I think that quote was powerful. And where I'm going with this point is that the biblical vision and portrayal of a perfect woman is not underutilized, undervalued, wasted, lost potential. But you'll wish you had 20 degrees. Basically, that's just what I wrote down here. We're going to keep going. So the third thing, and this is why I put it in the parentheses on the next slide. I put it up there, and then I just chose to put it as the third thing, is mother/nurturer. Because I think that's a big part of it. Like, a guy is the leading role, and with that is kind of like protector, provider, right? And in Genesis, I know I had you guys turn to Proverbs, but in Genesis, after the fall, at the very end of the chapter, actually, in Genesis chapter 3, this is kind of where the woman gets her name. And so in verse 20, now the man called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all the living. Now, was Eve the mother of all living? No. But Eve is representative of women, womankind, if you will. And she's the mother, and with that there are so many characteristics, but I think what you really see is that we were created with roles, and God doesn't ignore that. After the fall, when God curses man and woman, and the serpent as well, it's not general, it's specific to the roles. Yeah?
What if God makes someone born infertile?
Great question. Just wait. Just wait, because I'm going somewhere with this. So when God cursed man, it wasn't just a general curse. It was specific to man. Same thing with woman, specific to how they were created and designed. And if you need to put it in their roles. So he curses the serpent. And then to the woman in verse 16 of chapter 3. I will greatly multiply your pain and childbirth, and pain you will bring forth children, yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. So here you see the curse is specifically attacking her as an intimate companion, her as a mother, obviously, but more than just mother, but nurturer as well. And that's where I kind of focus on that a lot, but I think that's a powerful thing of how women were created and designed, is this nurturing that, if we're being honest, just men aren't always good at. We're not just natural nurturers. When Elizabeth and I disagree on things, a lot of times for her, there's that nurturing side that's coming out, and I'm just still like, all right, let's get this done, or whatever. Like, all right, we're just gonna tough it out. We're just gonna do this thing, like, guys. No, because she's not. And so we have to figure out how to work together, equal yet different, and that is a good thing. It's a very good thing. And so, like, mothers in general are nurturing physically, obviously, but can nurture in so many more ways than just physically. Nurturing spiritually. I mean, we read in Titus the passage about, like, how older women should act and what they should be doing is specifically nurturing younger women, teaching them, guiding them, being there for them, praying for them, like all these different things. I wish that I could explain this better. In my head, when I wrote this, I was like, this is going to be I don't need to write down a bunch of stuff on it, and my mind is kind of blanking on the nurturing side of it. But I think it's really important, and so I wish that I had written it down. But unfortunately I didn't. But anyway, women in raising a family and keeping the home and tending the home, what they are really doing is making sure humanity exists, because they're nurturing leaders, because they're nurturing their sons. They're nurturing future nurturers, because they're nurturing their daughters, leaders and helpers, people who are going to rise up and be the next generation. really. This is where I want to go with this now. This is good, but again, it's not something you've never heard before. And so for the guys and for the girls, I want to focus on something, because we were created male and female, and a lot of times when people talk about guys, it's just like, well, guys are supposed to be the head of the household, because that's what Ephesians says, and girls are just supposed to submit, because that's what Ephesians says. But that's not really what Ephesians says. What Ephesians says is, husbands, love your wives. Lead your wives well. Yes. And wives, submit to your husbands. But we weren't created husbands and wives. We were created male and female. And so if we go back, I'm doing this out of order, but if we go back and just look again, at the end of chapter 2, when Eve is brought to Adam, the man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh," in verse 23. "She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." The very first human relationship was not the mother-daughter, nurturer, father-son, father-daughter, mother-son relationship. The first human relationship was this, man and wife. And so when we look at what Ephesians is talking about with husbands, love your wives, lead well, all of that, wives, submit, then there's so much controversy in there. And that's where we can just easily fall into, well, you just need to submit because you're supposed to stay in the home because that's what it is. You're supposed to be the queen of the domestic domain. You're supposed to just kind of nurture that and just take care of that so that I can go out and do my thing. And well, you're supposed to love me. You're not really loving me that well. You're just being like a typical guy, and so you're just being, and that's just what it falls apart into. But Philippians, you don't have to turn there, but if you want to, Philippians chapter 2. I'm just going to turn there real quick. Sorry that it's 7:22. Yeah, I'll explain after we finish, actually. Philippians chapter 2. This is what it says. "Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, God, utmost value and importance, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, and being made in the likeness of men. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself. Being found in appearance as a man, realizing that he became fully human. That's when he humbled himself. That's kind of interesting. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. For this reason also God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name." Now, I just want to focus on this thing. There's so much controversy over submitting. There's so much controversy over how you're supposed to love and just what is love. Love is love. There's all of these conflicting messages in the world. And if I could really just sum it up, guys, all guys in general, the way that we are supposed to love that it says in Ephesians 5 is how Christ loved the church. Christ loved the church, what we just read, by not holding a certain status, a certain level of, well, this is who I am. Right? So I'm just talking to the guys right now. So for all of you, you're not married right now. But either you're going to be, or if you're not, if that's not what God has for you, you are going to go out. You are this generation that is in the world that God has next. And the way that you are supposed to function in that world is the way Christ loved the church. He died. He gave himself up. He sacrificed. Okay? So, how am I supposed to function as a guy? give myself up, basically. I'm supposed to be like Christ. I'm supposed to self-sacrificially just love and provide and lead and protect and fight for what is right. That's how God created me. Women, you're supposed to submit. And that's this dainty little thing. No, it's not. Okay? The Bible says that everybody is supposed to submit to one another. So really, when it talks about this whole submitting part, how are we supposed to do this? Well, have this mind, like Christ. Where, oh, yeah, the way that he submitted was for the benefit of other people around him. He cared about them more than he cared about himself. He didn't cling to, I'm an independent, I'm God. Okay? So why do we need to cling to, I'm an independent woman, I'm an independent man, I need to just do my thing, right? Okay. Now, where I'm going with all of this is, it's the same message for guys and for girls. We're supposed to love like God loved, putting others ahead of ourselves. Does that make sense? Okay. I wrote just a couple things at the end as like a recap thing. I didn't share this the way I wanted to, and I apologize for that. But I just, as a recap, I put down helper, not belittling. God is our helper, and he's main character, he's God. Woman in the home is not exclusive. That's not what it's saying. It's not saying you just have to be in the home all the time. It's saying, go out. Have dominion over the world. But specifically when it comes time, whenever that is for you, that God has you as a wife, as somebody over a home, along with the man, that's when family starts. It doesn't start when you have kids. A man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. That right there is the birth of your family. We have family, but there comes a point in time, whether you're a guy or a girl, when you not just have family. I have brothers and sisters, but now Elizabeth and I, we have a family. We are a family. And that's going to grow, but it's still a family as we are right now. And at that point, whether you're a guy or a girl, that's what God prioritizes in that home, that family aspect. And the really cool thing about it that I'm not going to get to is God's blessing is just over that. That's what God blesses. Going out, doing whatever your dreams are. God gave us those things for a reason. He blesses that, and he blesses prioritizing family in the home. And so if that's where we're headed towards when we get married and stuff, then why would we not practice that? Why would I say, well, eventually I need to be a leader, and eventually I need to be the best leader I can be. So I'm going to ignore all of that, and I'm just going to get away, and I'm going to live my life now before I have to have all this responsibility and accountability, and I have to lead. No, obviously, that's when you should work on that. That's when you can develop that and grow that so that you can be prepared. That's what God has for us. Same thing for a woman. Nurturer, intimate companion, queen of the domestic home, mother, nurturer. This is not all-encompassing. This is not what woman is. Again, this is just what we see in Genesis for both guys and girls. It doesn't have to come later. You can develop those things. You can, I'm talking for forever. So what I'll explain. We're not going to break up into our small groups and try and have small groups and still have this volleyball tournament, which is going to be a lot of fun and stuff like that. What I would want is break up into your small groups and just pray for each other. Take prayer requests, pray for each other.